it's finally here. We have all the maps, including some new maps for the British Isles within Europa Universalis 5, or I'm sorry, Project Caesar. And this is actually a big one of the bigger Tinto Maps diaries I've seen so far, presented by St. Dave UK, a brand new member of the Tinto Talks. Well, not new member, but new introduction to the dev diaries at least. Let's see what he has to say, because there's some really interesting stuff in today's dev diary, and then we're gonna talk more about the historical setting of the British Isles afterwards. Also guys, if you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing. I would appreciate it. It really encouraged me to make more videos like these in the future. And I also want to let you guys know that I'm starting my work on a big mega campaign, which includes pretty much all the Paradox games. So I'm curious if you guys are excited for that. Let me know in the comment section. Now when I say big, I really mean big. Look at this. This freaking thing is huge. Not only does he give the maps, he also gives background, historical background himself into everything that's happening. So we're going to analyze everything that the development team has to say about the British Isles in this video, so it's a little bit different from the other ones. And then after, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give more of a background to everything else. Pavia and the rest of the content design team are busy working on feedback from the previous Tinto map, so I'm standing in for this week, says St. Dave UK. Some of you might know me from here and on the forums. Long story short, I work on a very secret game that I am contractually obligated to redact. That's right, it's, let me guess, Project Caesar? Okay, buddy. Alright, I see what you did there. You're not getting the best of me. It's EU5, everybody knows. This week you get a double whammy, because mostly it's really hard to show Britain on its own on a screenshot, partly because of Sidestep, the British Isles naming controversy, but mainly because the gameplay of both is so different. This part of Europe is divided into two distinct regions, Great Britain and Ireland. So we get the Irish Isles as well, not just Britain. First, let's start with the more boring stuff and work our way to the juicy bits, of course. I liked St. Dave's style working with this and not the political map from the very get-go. Climate, we can see here we've got pretty much continental and oceanic within the entirety, with a little bit of Arctic sneak peeked all around here, around the mountainous areas, around the highlands, and a little bit in the northern parts of Wales, where apparently it can get a little bit chilly, I guess. Is that what Arctic means, guys? Topography, he says, the Isles are dominated by green and pleasant flatlands and low rolling hills. The periphery is punctuated by rocky mountains and craggy highlands. We would like to add some more impassable locations in northern England and the Scottish borders to make maneuvers a little bit more interesting and strategic, but would like suggestions from people more familiar with the Pennines. So if you are familiar with the Pennines, make sure you go down in the forums and you let them know. Personally, I'm not that familiar with the Pennines, so I'm not going to say anything about it. Vegetation, is it all swamps? Is it swamp people living in the British Isles? Oh wait, this is not Roman times. They've turned them into grasslands by now, right? The great moors, bogs, and ferns are represented by sparse vegetation. Meanwhile, much of the land is still wooden. Interesting. So we've got a buttload of forest and woods in the north. Actually, even the south, a lot more woods than I expected it. And Ireland as well is pretty much half of it woods, as well as sparse grasslands all around. In the southern bits of the British Isles, there's a significantly more farmlands compared to the north. Actually, the only farmlands are in the south, from what I can tell here. Raw material situation aims to reflect the economic reality of medieval Britain. Shepherding was common on every corner of the island. A lot of the wool produced was sold to the industrial hub of the Low Countries. That is actually accurate. One of the reasons why the Flemish switched side to the British side during the 800 Years' War, because the cloth manufacturers within Flanders were not getting the wool from the British, because initially they were on the French side, so they rebelled and their leadership had to eventually switch sides, right? Which was in turn sold back to the British Isles. Yes, it was in fact a market, wasn't there? The further northwest we go, the less fertile the terrain, and as such, the greater reliance on pastoral farming such as livestock over wheat. The western hills and valleys also expose a greater number of mineral delights, including the historical stannery mines of Devon and Cornwall. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I like Dave's style of presenting the dev diaries. He gives a lot more background to all the decision making, which I really enjoy, and he does even more as we progress in the dev diary, of course. So let's check this out a little bit more in detail. Ireland pretty much has mostly livestock. This is the highest concentration of livestock I've ever seen on any of the maps so far. They've got a little bit of lead, a little bit of stone, a little bit of copper in the south. I think that's Munster, right, in the south? I'm not sure. How do you pronounce that? Munster? Is that the German version, isn't it? A little bit of lumber and salt in the north, more lumber, more salt on the western coast, as well as marble, and even some tin and fish. In Scotland itself, we've got grain, lumber. It's actually pretty diverse in Scotland, from what I can tell here. Even alum, clay, sturdy grains, horses, fruit, etc. And then England is pretty much packed with everything. There's a lot of wheat, actually. Wheat is in abundance in England, from what I can tell. And I'm guessing that this wheat is in the same provinces that we have farmlands, right? Because wheat requires, I would assume, a little bit of farming, right? But not only, of course. There's a lot of wool as well, as mentioned by Dave himself. We got fish, and then in Wales we have iron, coal, stone, more wool, wild game, and medicaments, which I'm assuming means healing stuff, right? Or even more medicaments here. Is this Oxford by any chance? I'm not sure. Markets, he says that you can see the two starting markets are London and Dublin. Okay, so we have a Dublin that includes all of Ireland, half of Scotland, and even parts of the northern bits of England itself, which is interesting to see, actually. So the English crown will have some of its provinces a part of a completely different market from the get-go. Aside from London, we could have chosen any town from Aberdeen to Bristol. We chose Dublin as it was the main trade center in Ireland at the time, and also because it handsomely split the Isles to the east and west of the Pennines, demonstrating the impact that terrain can have on dynamic market attraction. Wow, okay, so that is actually because of terrain. So the terrain can be one of the factors from which provinces or locations choose which market they're going to be a part of. I love that. So that means the terrain's going to have some sort of modifier for speed, so the faster you can get your goods across to the market center, the better it is to be a part of that particular market, and ergo why these provinces are probably a part of the Dublin market and not the London one, because crossing over the mountains would be a little bit of an issue, I guess. They're both shades of red because they're colored after the market center's top overlord country. Market control is a viable playstyle, and we like to think of it as a form of map painting for countries not focused on traditional conquest route. Okay, I like that. So we got a new insight, namely that the color of the market owner is going to be the color of the market, so that's going to change based on the color of the market owner. Culture. We have decided to go with a monolithic English culture. We could have forced the introduction of a second Northumbrian or even third Mercian culture, but typically they were not really considered separate peoples. The English, though diverse in origin and with a variety of dialects, have already begun to coalesce in the face of the Viking invasions from hundreds of years before. That is true. By 1337, you would pretty much have a homogeneous English people. I mean, I guess we would see Northumbrian and Mercian languages, right? If that's going to be eventually a thing. But culture-wise, I would assume that English is going to be the main one for those areas. Scotland, conversely, is a real porridge of culture. The lowland Scots, who speak a dialect of Northumbrian English, have later developed into the Scots language, dominate their kingdom from their wealthy burghs, and are gradually encroaching onto the pastoral lands of the Gaelic Highlanders. Is this made with AI? I kind of feel like this text was made with AI. Either this was made with AI, or my man really has an amazing literary sense and knows how to make kind of... I love that. I have to say, I'm really impressed. I love this Death Diary. The Norse Gaelic clansmen watch from the Western Isles while some old settlements remain around the Galloway. The far north, ironically called Sutherland, retains some Norse presence. Alright, so let's actually look at the culture map mode before we continue reading what he says, so you guys get a better idea of what he's talking about. He's talking about the Norse around here. Norse Gael is its culture, is a culture unto itself. We also have Norwegian in the north mixed in with a little bit of Highland spots all around here. Then we got the English monolith, as he says. Welsh, quite a lot of Welsh around as well. I'm actually not sure if it would be this much Welsh compared to English. That was primarily English, the nobles and so on. Of course, you still had Welsh origin nobles, but not as many as the English ones. Cornish has almost died out by this point, and that is, I guess, pretty accurate. We also have here Anglo-Irish by the coastline of Ireland, as well as Irish in the majority of the Irish Isle, with the Norse Gaelic and Anglo-Irish within this particular bit in the Isle of Man, which, in case you're wondering, American viewers, this is all the men they originate from. That's why this is called the Isle of Man. All men came from this island, and women came from Venus, in case you're wondering. Wales, conquered around a century by this point, plays host to English burghers looking to make a few quid, as well as the descendants of the Norman adventure knights and the Marcher lordships, but it's still majority Welsh speaking from Anglesey to Cardiff. That is accurate, yes. The Anglo-Irish, representing the spectrum from Cambro-Norman knight to the so-called Old English settlers, live in great numbers in the the southeast trading towns from Dublin to Cork, as well as in smaller numbers in the frontier outposts. Funnily enough, just a few hundred years later, majority of people would eventually pretty much become English-speaking people in Ireland, not so much Gaelic, Irish, or whatever it's called, right? How many actual Irish people speak Gaelic in Ireland, or what's it called, Irie, or whatever it's called, right? The cosmopolitan towns across the Isles are also home to people from elsewhere in Europe, most notably Flemish weavers from the Low Countries, though their numbers are too small to be impacting the map mode. The conquest of 1066 is no longer fresh, but the continuing bonds between the aristocratic classes of England, Scotland, and France have kept the French language alive and strong. That is true. The reason that English people have so many words from French language borrowed, like environment, that comes from the French environnement, right? And a lot of other words, not just really a lot of them. Dave decided it's not even worth taking a screenshot of the religious map mode. There's tiny minority Jewish people around Scottish and Irish towns, but they're so small a number they don't even register on the map mode. Other than that, it's all Catholic, but not for long. Is there any Anglican religion in 1337? No, obviously not. It's a few hundred years until that spawns. But I get his point. Now, the areas, he says there's 4 provinces of Ireland, sorry, Meath, and splitting England roughly into the larger Anglo-Saxon earldoms, which have some similarities with modern regions, sorry, Yorkshire. Alright, let's look at this. So, these are the regions. We got the Hebrides, we've got the Highlands, the Lowlands, Northumbria, Midland, East Anglia, Home Countries, West Countries, Wales, and 4 different Irish counties. I like it. I actually like it. It's pretty much how we see it in EU4, more or less, right? A little bit of division more in EU4, but it's about the same. Then we also have the Northern Islands and the Orkneys here, which I would assume would include the Falklands and everything else too. Province-wise, he says that he fixed the color of the province map mode so you can see the individual provinces a bit more clear, and I can see that from the image itself, true. These are largely based on the historic counties, which have remained fairly constant through history, whilst merging some of those that are too small. We certainly offended somebody. The ancient Scottish shires, or better yet, shires, are pretty messy and difficult to coalesce into a neat provinces, so any suggestions for better arrangement would be welcome. That's your cue right there. Especially if you're Scottish and you know your history, then this is the way. Alright, so we got here Sutherland, Ross, Moray, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Fife, Strathclyde, Galloway. I like the color differences between the different regions to highlight them a little bit better. That's nice. Yeah, I like the improvements to the map mode. That's really good. It makes it a lot easier to read as well and understand, in my opinion. Locations, he says, you might notice that locations in Ireland are varyingly written in both English and Irish. This is because we have the new system up and running where we can name locations by the primary culture of the country. Really? That owns them. Oh, that is cool. So that means, for example, London might be Londres if it was ruled by a Catalan country. If it is a work in progress feature, we might add more elements such as game settings to base the name on dominant culture. Oh, that is so freaking cool, man. So I hope they keep this. That's nice. So basically, whoever owns that country, that particular province, gets to name that particular province based on their own language. Now, here's a brand new map mode here. The government types, as with most of Europe, most of the countries are under a monarchy or another, but the Irish Tuathas begin with the tribal government type. This, among other mechanics such as redacted, helped to give them a unique playstyle in Europe. Is this going to be the new CK3 newbie island? Who's to say? There we go. We got monarchies all around except the tribes over. Well, half of Ireland is tribes, not all of them. The other half are full-on feudal monarchies, I would assume, with an emphasis on the eastern coast and the southern bits primarily being monarchies. Now, this here is the actual political map mode. We have Norway owning the Orkneys. We've got the Isles as a separate entity, Balliol, as well as Scotland separate, and this is going to start at war with each other if I'm not mistaken. Then we have the Kingdom of England. We got Man, we've got Ulster as well. We got the Pale and other parts here, and Wales is a subject, I would assume, of the Kingdom of England, and yes, it is correct, they are a subject. We also see in the bottom here English owning the northern bits of France, just a tiny little bit of a corner here. And then when it comes to Ireland, we've got a buttload of them. We got Tyrconnell, we got Tyrone, Oriel, Clandeboy, a lot of areas. I probably haven't heard of half of these, honestly. I'm not really well documented with the Irish tribes. I know the ones that I know from EU4 and some of the bigger ones like Thomond, Offaly, and so on, Munster, Pale, obviously. So this is good for me too, because because I'm learning something new and I'm gonna check the backgrounds of all of these. Love the map mode. Let's see what Dave has to say about it, because one thing I love about this dev diary is that he gives the background to each of the countries, including Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and England. So he mentions England, of course, stands as the dominant kingdom of the Isles. Despite having a lot of power resting on the barons, the country is fairly unitary even at this point, with little practical separation between the crown's power and somewhere like Kent versus Yorkshire. However, there are notable exceptions. The powerful Burgesses' estate and the city of London enjoys ancient freedoms, and still do today, by the way, some of them, from royal power, whilst the king peers in from the crown seat of power in Westminster. The county of Palatine of Durham is not represented by a country, but buildings that give the clergy estate a huge amount of power in the location it is presented in. This also ties into political gameplay as a something redacted. Okay. The newly created Duchy of Cornwall, the only duchy of England at the time, would also not be represented well by the Cornwall country, being a disparate set of manorial holdings that are ironically mostly in Devon. Cornwall, of course, exists as a releasable country though, so you can, if you want to release as Cornwall yourself, try and take on the vile English and fail because you were a disappointment. How can you not even destroy England as Cornwall is beyond me. All these years I taught you for nothing. Anyway, so let's continue. The Isle of Man is a little bit less certain, but now we have it as a subject of England. On paper, it was a kingdom awarded to William Tangaboo, the king's favorite. However, we aren't sure if he actually wielded any real power on the Isle. It changed hands between England and Scotland numerous times in the period, but in practice it appears to have been governed by the local council of barons, and they would love some more feedback if there's any more accurate information on this particular region from the time from you guys. These decisions have been made because England heaves itself out of the feudal system. We thought it would be best if the small fry internal politicking is handled through the estates and another system. Then the diplomacy tracks are freed up the English player to behave more outwardly against other major countries. The way that he's depicting England is kind of letting me know that they want to put England as one of the major powers continuously. I'm kind of getting the vibe that England's going to play one of the major roles in EU5, which it should, of course. Historically it did, obviously. Now let's see what he says about Wales, because that's going to be a hot topic for a lot of you for sure. Though subjugated by conquest, yes, Wales was not formally annexed into the Kingdom of England until the 1500s. So what I have to say about this is that technically the Statute of Rudolph in 1284 kinda annexed Wales, to be fair, roughly 50 years prior to the start date to the English Kingdom. However, what that did is it offered both Welsh law and English law within criminal courts in Wales. It was true, proper full annexation of Wales into the English Kingdom was done by the Tudors, which were a Welsh dynasty by the way, in the 1500s, mid 1500s, and that's when basically Welsh law was completely dissolved and English law was the one that was standardized around Wales as well. So I guess he's right. From that perspective, sure. Yeah, I guess he's right. I understand what he's doing, and I guess kind of, yeah. For those familiar with Welsh history will note that historically the Principality of Wales didn't extend much beyond the old Kingdom of Gwynedd. Much of the county to the southwest was in fact ruled by Marcher lords, which we represent with a powerful nobility estate in the valleys and beyond. There's an alternative vision of Wales that I would like to gauge opinion on, and that is expanding it to include the earldom of Chester and the marches on the English side of the modern borders. For an Englishman familiar with modern borders, this might look alarming, but these lands were also constitutionally ambiguous parts of the Welsh March until the 1500s. This will hand over to the Wales player the full responsibility of dealing with the martial lords, allowing England to focus on bigger pictures like beating the French. I don't know how exactly they're gonna portray Wales as a separate entity, right? Because it should be fairly well integrated within England, even though they still had Welsh law alongside English law. Let's get to the fun bits though. Ireland is going through a moment of change. English royal power is centered around the Lordship of the Pale, the King's dominion ruling out of the Dublin Castle. However, it struggles to grasp onto the rebellious Hiberno-Norman earls scattered around the island, some of whom remain a vassal, some of whom have managed to slip free of the royal control. The tenestry system of succession endemic to the Gaelic Irish has its advantages, but it can lead to chaotic feuds between rival branches. The so-called Burke Civil War has fractured the powerful earldom of Ulster into rival Burke cousins who jealously feud over their shrinking lordship in Connacht. Native Irish princes of the north have reconquered most of their own lands from the Burghs, but there's also two rival O'Neill cousins who style themselves King of Tyrone, either side of the River Bon. Suffice to say that Ireland is in a pretty shabby situation. And big question, is this the O'Neill from Stargate? Is it him? Probably not, isn't it? Scotland, of course, as you probably know by now, starts at war. The Chancellor, Edward Balliol, continues his attempt for the Scottish throne with England's tacit permission. It's hard to determine the exact lands held by Balliol in 1337, but we know his disinherited loyalists held the castle of Perth, whilst his English allies had seized the large tracts of the lowlands from Bruce. Balliol also had brought the loyalties of MacDonald and the other Hebridean galley lords by granting them a remote land on the western coast of the mainland, and we see that over here shown on the actual map. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is the MacDonald that made the restaurant chain. Totally. If you tell your history teacher, by the way, he's gonna be really impressed with you. I'm gonna give you an A. Scotland's canny regent Sir Andrew the Moray launches his decisive counterattack as his true king David II de Bruce waits in exile in France. And boy, am I excited to play here. I think like England's gonna be one of my 5th or 6th playthroughs. Obviously, Byzantines are first. Dynasties, we know about Plantagenet, Balliol, and Bruce, so I've zoomed in on Ireland to show the ruling dynasties of the various chiefdoms and earls. Of course, around the Pale and all of these areas, we have the Plantagenets, but then we have the O'Neills, Mathgamagarabus, O'Donnells, and I'm not even gonna bother to pronounce the other ones. I'm just gonna put an O and then just cough, and it's gonna be an Irish dynasty. Oh, that was an Irish dynasty, in case you don't believe me. You're stupid. There, I said it. Populations, we got some big boys. 5 million in England, roughly 500,000 within the Scottish bits, and I'm not gonna count all of the Ireland, but roughly around 600,000, I would assume, from what I can tell here. Another 300,000 in Wales. And next week, guys, is the fun one. Next week we have Anatolia. Oh my god, I'm so excited to see how many Greeks we have in Anatolia, what the religions are in Anatolia. Oh my god, I'm genuinely coming just thinking about that. I'm mega hyped for this. So freaking hyped for this one. Now in the comments, Dave does mention that Westminster is the capital, not London. He says that Hech Oglid is formable for Welsh culture. I'm assuming that is going to be some sort of country. That's cool. A sneak peek of one of the formable nations, apparently. And he says that when a civil war combatant wins the civil war, they become the original country, as should be, of course. That's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun with it. And if you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Love you and take care of yourselves.